Welcome back, everyone. I am Cass Piancey, and I'm joined as usual by my partner in crime, Mr. Bennett Tomlin. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Cass. How are you?
I'm doing good. We are joined by a very special guest today. She goes by the moniker Mooncat on YouTube. Welcome. How are you, Mooncat?
Hello. I'm good, thank you.
We're having you on today specifically because you decided to do a video that covers Web3, the Metaverse, NFTs, whatever you want to call it, and was incredibly critical. It was a very long video as well. It's over an hour long. If anyone wants to check it out, I highly recommend it. We're going to leave it in the show notes. But we're talking to you because I haven't seen as entertaining a video as that one was that could be that critical. So I want to talk about not just your process, but also like why. Why did you jump into this? Why are you fascinated by this? This, I don't know, space ecosystem, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so I've been keeping an eye on the space for quite a long time, and I've always been interested in like scams, and so I got started out on YouTube investigating MLMs, and then I sort of moved on to sort of get rich quick schemes and also motivational speakers in general, because I feel like the whole thing is very connected. The same psychology and cult mentality is used throughout the whole thing. And I noticed crypto becoming very mainstream, very popular, and I found all of the same sort of mind tricks being used, I suppose. So I naturally found it really interesting, kept an eye on it for a long time. And then, I decided to like really jump into it like at the start of January this year. And then it took me like, I guess nearly a whole 3 months to kind of investigate everything. And even then, there was still so much more I didn't talk about in my video, like so many extra scams and everything that I could have talked about, and so many things to do with like how awful it would be if Bitcoin became the world currency. Like, it's such a dystopian thing to think about. And I didn't even like fully go into that thought experiment, but it's, it's quite a lot to take in and think about. But I had to sort of try and decide, okay, what's the most important things I need to talk about here? And it was still an hour and 40 minutes long after I got rid of a load of things that I could have talked about. Yeah,
well, we never seem to run out of topics for discussion because like you said, there's just so many scams everywhere. But you brought up some really compelling arguments. I think it helped me to recognize once again, I think I had not been as focused on the venture capitalist side of it and how gross the venture capital side is, and how it really does feel like it's like poisoning the well. If there is any decent water that is in this in this system, it's being poisoned as we speak.
Yeah, I don't think the people who are really excited about crypto really understand the full extent of how much VCs are involved in this and how they're basically the same people that they think that they're fighting against. It's quite worrying, really, and how powerful Peter Thiel really is and how scary he is. That was the most shocking thing that I found when I looked into it. Just his whole story, and like how these sort of right-wing conspiratorially minded people they love the idea. But the thing is that they're also really, really scared of this whole one world government thing happening. But like, if that's going to happen, it's going to be Peter Thiel. It's not, there's not some crazy conspiracy happening on the government side. It's definitely Peter Thiel who will do it. If anybody does it, it will be Peter Thiel.
Yeah. He had his whole seasteading venture that he tried to do, and that failed miserably. But he also, something that Bennett has been looking into more so than myself, is that he is very politically active
Yes, he
America.
Loves Donald Trump, and
and a lot of really awful politicians. Don't let it stop there.
Yeah, he's donated a lot to Donald Trump, and I find that very interesting because, like, Donald Trump was also the president that sort of decreased everybody's trust in democracy overall, which I think even though, like, Peter Thiel's an intelligent guy, and I don't think Donald Trump is, but I think he was behind him as president because he literally made everybody think this democracy thing is maybe not quite so good, and that's in his interest. So it's like really clever if you think about it.
I hate giving that concept credit, though. A lot of people on cryptocurrency Twitter, I think Bennett was talking to some of them yesterday, where a lot of them proposed the idea that because Bennett was basically suggesting that almost all of the politicians that these cryptocurrency bros vote for, first of all, they're voting for them because of one single issue, which is they're pro-cryptocurrency. So they're not thinking outside of that issue at all, which is kind of terrifying because almost every other issue is more important than whether or not you like cryptocurrency. But some of the people, essentially, like you said, they're like basically dismantling democracy. And Bennett was just like, well, if the ends don't justify the means. Like, if the evil is worse than the single issue that you're voting for, how is this acceptable? And people are just like, no, well, like these cryptocurrency, they don't want any government. So if it's helping to dismantle it, they're all for it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just so cringe-inducing because it's not like they're even reflecting on an alternative, right? They're not suggesting like, oh, but this is the better form of government that we can have. It's like, well, no government and everything will be fine.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like people are seeing the issues, which is a good thing, but they're trying to like fix everybody wants a simple fix for all of the issues in the world. And it always works really well when somebody comes along with a half convincing answer to all of the issues in the world. And, MLMs came along and were like, oh, you can leave your job and you can spend more time with your family and you don't even have to work that much and you'll earn even more than what you are in your job. And obviously this all is born out of the problems with capitalism as it is and society as it is at the moment. But obviously MLMs aren't the answer and crypto isn't the answer, but they want this really simple answer. But when in reality, all crypto's doing is just rolling the clock back like 100 years on all of the progress we've made with like financial institutions. And it's like, obviously there's still problems there. Obviously we haven't reached a utopia. We never will reach a utopia, but it's all about sort of battling forwards, not rolling the clock back. And a lot of people who watch my video were like, why do you love big banks so much? I was like, I don't love big banks, but I don't think allowing them to do whatever they want is the answer.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of that too. We get a lot of they think we love the Fed, the big banks, the Treasury, like just because we criticize cryptocurrency. I think that's very funny. Bennett, sorry, I don't want to take all the.
No, you're okay. I was just really, when I was watching the video, it was really exciting because you seem to really get the bigger picture of what's going on with cryptocurrencies a lot better than much of the critical media I've seen on cryptocurrencies. Like, you accurately pointed to some of the political issues and the way they want to dismantle certain political systems. You were able to bring in like the future dystopian vision of techno-feudalism that sits at like the heart of a lot of cryptocurrency ideology. And so I'm really curious how you got to that point of understanding, like what your process was to investigate cryptocurrencies and see them structurally that way.
Yeah, I actually started out by reading a book that was pro-crypto because, like, even though my gut feeling was quite anti-crypto, I did want to get the other side of the story. So I started out with a book by George Gilder. I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh, wait, yes, the libertarian guy?
Yeah, but when I read the book, I decided not to look him up after I'd read the book because I didn't want my opinion of the book to be weighed on who he was. And then I looked him up after, and I was like, oh, a lot of things really make sense now. But yeah, I read his book anyway, and he basically tries to make the argument that blockchain is the answer to loads of problems, but he's like so vague. He doesn't explain how exactly, an append-only database is meant to solve all of the world's problems, but for some reason he thinks it is. And it's a lot of it's like based on how Google and Facebook aren't building AI models very well and would be able to do that a lot better on the blockchain. And that kind of got me into the into thinking about like what the real reasons are behind this and how it's probably all about data. So I kind of went down that route from reading that book, really, because yeah, it's all about sort of like these tech Silicon Valley people, they're looking like decades into the future and they're thinking, where's the world going? And they're thinking democracy isn't working because in a way it isn't. The world's getting way too complicated for people to vote based on things that they know about. The world's too complicated. We don't know who the best person is to vote for. So they're thinking, well, the future of the world is going to be based on algorithms, not on democracy. And so that's the way they see going forward. They need some way to collect as much data as possible to be able to run their society on algorithms, basically, is how I see it.
One thing you said there that was interesting to me, and it reminded me of your GB News video, is your comment about how they're investing on potentially a very different timeline. And they're even okay with many of the ventures failing as long as they nudge certain other things in the direction they want.
Exactly, like people's mindset, yeah.
Exactly. And so like with cryptocurrency, I think that's potentially a striking example of that, because even if none of the projects are successful, they've started seeding a lot of young people with these very Austrian economics libertarian ideas and have started to shift those mindsets. So they've gotten that benefit now, even if the projects are completely unsuccessful.
Yeah, that's exactly it as well. And even if the projects are successful, it's not like many of them are losing money anyway, because as long as they get people to buy into crypto, whatever projects they do, they're successful. It doesn't matter if they provide value or not, as long as the people buy crypto. I mean,
yeah, it's a classic. It's also a classic, as Bennett said, a classic Overton. It's like an Overton window thing. Like if you just push everybody to think, well, Austrian economics makes sense. Like that part makes sense to me. Then you can just push forward a bunch of other horrible ideas. So I definitely see that as being a huge part of it. But I do want to jump back into something that you initially started with, which is you started your YouTube career going after these MLM scams and people like Tony Robbins and Gary Vee. And you seem to believe that there's this overarching thematic psychology between all of these topics that you've selected so far. I'm wondering how you feel like Web3 falls into that psychology. Like, what is the psychology that you see what's the insidious psychology of Web3?
It's like kind of like a cult mentality, really. It's what works really well is providing people with like a salvage from the really like complicated and grey world with nuances and things they can't control that they don't understand. And somebody comes along with them and saying, actually, the world isn't grey, the world is black and white, and I've got the rules, and they're clearly written out, and if you just follow these rules, then everything will be fine. And I think that's a really attractive thing these days, because a lot of people are getting messed around by capitalism and all of that, and they don't have a lot of money, and they see the world as this really complicated thing that they don't have control over anymore. And, you know, a lot of the marketing around crypto is take back control. And I saw the exact same thing with like the Brexit campaign over here. It was like, take back control of your country. A lot of the world, like sovereignty being thrown around a hell of a lot, when it doesn't really mean that at all. You don't have control over your own data on the blockchain. Like the people who have control over the data are the company that collects it, not you. Like, sure you can choose to have your data on the blockchain, but it's like we'll get to a point that they will build this world where it's like literally impossible for you to function without putting your data on the blockchain. So it's like they still have control. You don't have any control over this still. It's just a marketing campaign, basically.
One interesting difference that I can hear already ringing in my head between what you're talking about. So if we talk about like Rachel Hollis or Tony Robbins or whoever, you know, you've done other videos on, those kind of people, or Arbonne or these other MLM kind of culty things, they always argue that they are not a cult. They are not a religion. They are either they're a business or they're a marketing firm or they're helping people or whatever. But I think now that cryptocurrency has largely embraced the cult title, the religious cult, like, yeah, we are a cult. Join in. Isn't that cool? And I'm wondering if that's almost more effective than those other kind of MLM psychological scams.
Yeah, I think that, well, it is a cult, but it has because it's got a monetary aspect to it, it's very, very powerful. And I saw that with MLMs, as soon as somebody promises you riches, it's, people are so much more likely to just go along with whatever they say. It's kind of it's a blurry line, isn't it? Like when something crosses over into what is a cult and what isn't. But the whole the way that they sort of dismiss any criticism as they've even got a word for it, FUD. I mean, that's culty in itself. As soon as the person starts saying to ignore the people who are being negative, I think that's quite culty as well, because they just call it negativity. It's not, legitimate criticism. It's just negativity. That's when it sort of starts crossing over into cult land. And I saw the same thing with Tony Robbins and Rachel Hollis. I don't know if I'd call what they do a cult, but it's definitely cult-like. Yeah.
One thing you discussed in your video, which was particularly interesting to me, was the intersection between cryptocurrencies and influencer culture. Do you want to talk about a little bit what that intersection of the Venn diagram looks like?
Yeah, it's just very disappointing to see so many influencers come out with rug pulls, basically. Just learning that this is what they think of their fans. This is what they think of the people who look up to them. It's really disappointing to see so many people like that. But even then, you see that they're fans, and these people will pull rug pulls on them, and then even after they've done the rug pull, they still love them. They're like, oh, it's not their fault. They just lost confidence in the project. They worked really hard on it, and it's just it's really hard to get them to see the light when.
Yeah, that brings up your. I still to this day don't understand this. Gary Vee, for anyone who's unfamiliar, bless your heart, and I hope you never have to find out who he is. But Gary Vee is I don't know what to call him, a venture capitalist. He
marketer.
Probably has his own.
He's primarily an angel investor, so he'll go up to companies, at the very start and drop millions into it or however much, and he'll do that across a load of different startups, even some terrible ones. And then as soon as one does really well, he's like, "See, look, I was right." And then he basically uses that to base his entire career off.
Well, I heard him. There's a video going around. I don't know, yesterday, the day before, something like that, where it's Gary Vee on some podcast, and they're like, well, you're not saying NFTs are the future, right? And he's like, no, I'm not saying NFTs are the future. I'm not saying NFTs are the future. I'm saying that, I'm going to invest in 100 different NFTs. And one of these is going to make it. One of these is going to be huge. And you're just like, ugh. First of all, shut up. But second, it's such a angel investor, VC, hedge fund state of mind where it's like, pores, listen up. I just want to tell you how you're going to make it. Take your money, all your money, see this new hip trendy thing, dump all your money into 100 different things that are within that thing. So if it's AI, just 100 different AI companies. One of them, it's going to make you $1 million. And that is the worst fucking advice I've ever heard.
The thing is, though, he's got so much money, he can afford the risk, whereas most of the people he's talking to can't afford that risk.
But he doesn't care.
No.
He doesn't care what the poor people that he's talking to, as we know, because he's had, as you pointed out in your video, he does midnight phone calls with Mr. Beast and Logan Paul and rich famous people to tell them to buy Bored Apes. It's the most cringe-inducing thing I've seen, but he's still popular, and he still has resonance in not just the cryptocurrency space. I think Silicon Valley likes this guy still. I think other hedge fund people seem to still think he's somehow knowledgeable. I just don't understand exactly what's going on there, but he's not the only one. He's a common personality type in cryptocurrency, right? These guys are drawn to this space.
Worth noting that Gary was an angel investor in Coinbase, and he's probably making a hell of a lot of money out of that. He's probably got a lot of investments that really hinge on him being able to make crypto a really successful thing. He's got many vested interests in making crypto, really popular. But in much the same way, I think Gary comes up to a lot of people with a really simple answer of how to get rich, which is just work really hard, work all the time. It's like, on what, Gary? Work on what? But he won't say. He's extremely vague about everything.
You should sell your neighbors the flowers you pulled out of their own flower bed. That's how you make it in this world. But I think that call, Cass, you were talking about is like a really good example of a lot of the problems when influencer culture hits NFT and crypto culture, right? Because they're on this call and you've got Jake Paul and all these other dumbasses discussing how they think it's important that people begin investing in these NFTs, that they got this call from Gary Vaynerchuk and there's all these billionaires on the line and they're being told that this is the next big thing. And so if you want to get in on this next big thing, you need to invest. And they keep talking for a minute longer and you hear one of them go, oh, yeah. One of them asks, I think it was Mr. Beast, so what's your rarest punk? And he goes,
Logan Paul says, what's your rarest ape or whatever it is? And he says, I've
been selling them. Yeah, I've been selling them.
He had no idea. He had no interest in what these characteristics were at all. Mr. Beast like sold them straight away for V friends, he said. So like
V friends, right?
Yeah. So obviously like Gary V had another call with him and he was like, you know what the next best thing is after these apes? It's my scribbles. And yeah, it's depressing that it works so well. Like even on someone like Mr. Beast, who is obviously like not the most stupid person in the world. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's funny to me that in order for Gary V to have friends, he had to mint them on the blockchain. It's just, like you said, really disappointing to see so many people just in such an outright and public way try to take advantage of their fans and the influence they've developed. And then one of the things that's interesting, like we keep mentioning Gary Vee, and it's because he's got a certain enthusiasm that makes him hard to ignore. And like, so when he was coming out with his most recent book, if you wanted to get on the whitelist for the NFT project that was going to be coming after that book, you had to buy 12 physical copies of the book, and then you could buy the NFT.
And I think in your video, Mooncat, did you show someone who literally tweeted, Gary V, this book is fire, and was burning a copy of the book? And then he retweeted that tweet. Am I getting that right?
He liked it, yeah.
Or liked it? What is going on? It's
just like capitalism on crack. I think just like you've completely removed any value from what you're selling at this point. You're telling people to buy 12 of your books. Why? It doesn't matter. You get a free JPEG. Like that's the point we've got to.
And not even a free JPEG, right? You get the right to buy the JPEG. Is what I thought it was.
But he doesn't pump those ones with Logan Paul and Mr. Beast.
Right. You're just the retail plebe buying into it. There's no This is so frustrating to me because not only are we talking about like Gary Vee and these dumb NFT things, but like a lot of this has been an issue always. So if you go back far enough, like sometimes sending Bitcoin can cost too much money for a poor person to be able to send a Bitcoin. And so when you start talking about like wanting this to be the future of finance, but then, also we want to bank the unbanked, but then, also poor people, sorry, like you can't really use this protocol at all. Like the whole thing is just a giant.
Yeah, that's another thing I did actually mention is the way that you can only get certain NFTs if you can pay enough gas fees to buy them. Like you're not only bidding on the NFT, you're bidding on the gas fees to get the NFT faster than somebody else. It's like the whole thing is just coded to reward rich people, and that's it.
And you even got into that, which again, I really appreciated in this piece of media, like how that even matters at the consensus and protocol level. Like you talked about how in proof of stake coins, your influence is in effect directly proportional to how much stake you control. And this is true for a variety of so-called DAOs and stuff where your voting is proportional to how many tokens you can put up. And it is very common for cryptocurrency to reinvent this kind of plutocracy where the richest and most powerful get all of this control.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of sell proof of stake as it being even less likely for a 51% attack to happen because somebody needs to have half of the currency on the blockchain to be able to do it. But if you sort of extrapolate, like, think about how proof of stake would start and how, because you get rewarded, like you have to have 32 ETH to even buy in to be a validator on proof of stake. And then like the more blocks you validate, the more money you make. And that just extrapolates into the future of rewarding richer people with more cryptocurrency. And like, if you look into the future, that absolutely means that, you know, only a few people could end up with half of the money on the blockchain.
This is actually even exacerbated in Ethereum because of their monetary policy after EIP 1559, which started burning the transaction fees. Once the merge goes live for proof of stake for Ethereum, it's supposed to become deflationary. So if you're staking, you're receiving the benefits from the new coins being issued, and you're receiving the benefits from all the transaction fees being burned. So you've got two ways that your proportional control is increasing. Well, anyone who actually uses the network is having their proportional control diluted out, which isn't great for a long-term economic system, but does benefit you if you're an early investor.
Yeah, I mean, we've had deflationary currencies in the past, and they have benefited the people who originally had the most money. And, you know, and the rich, you know, like elite owner class in the past have said, oh, well, the poor people are only poor because they're lazy. And I think like that would happen again. Like, oh, it's your fault for not buying in early. Oh, it's your fault for not building some kind of DAO. Like,
it's already happening. I mean, that already happens. It's such a common trope that it's not even annoying anymore. It's just boring to me when people are like, have fun staying poor, not gonna make it, no coiner.
Yeah.
Well, and it kind of dovetails really nice with Gary V's Sigma grind set mentality. The best thing to do is to be born with no privilege and work 20 hours a day until you make it like me and can buy the jets.
This is the other point that I forgot that I wanted to make, but it's funny that all three of us are sitting here talking about how difficult it is for people who perhaps lack the capital to join the club, join the party. Because recently, a lot of us no-coiners have been told to check our privilege because we don't get it. We're the ones who don't get it. That Bitcoin, Ethereum, these smart contracts and these new financial protocols are actually benefiting the poor people the most, who need it the most. And for me personally, it's such a slight at what we do because we're clearly not trying to rip people off, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like to be able to have the means to like make content like we do, like you have to be privileged in a way, don't you? Like it's like,
of course,
obviously we're not, you know, on the breadline or whatever, but why does there always have to be a monetary incentive to everything that you do? Like, obviously, I want to be paid for making my video. Like, this is my job now. I don't have anything else that I'm making money from. But, like, I get people saying to me, oh, you're only doing this to make money. I'm like, you do realize I could have made way more money from shilling crypto.
Yeah.
I have an audience. I could have used that to my advantage for way more money than for talking against crypto. But they're in this mindset of everybody does everything to make money. And that's a really bad mindset to have. Like, some people don't just want to make money.
And I think that's where I'm coming from, is this idea of like, well, check your privilege, weirdo. You're being a rich first world creep is what you're being. And I'm like, man, maybe the coiners who have been lucky and made a lot of money from their early investment in a crapshoot should check their privilege before they start telling all the no-coiners how they should identify financially and telling all the poor people in places like throughout Africa or let's say in El Salvador, yeah, that they know what's best for them. Because I feel like America or Britain or France or the Netherlands, we've all had our chance to tell them exactly how to run their countries and run their continents and how to do things. And we fucked it up really bad. So maybe we should step back and let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, it does sort of tie into that whole Jack Dorsey thing with his very charitable endeavor of banking the unbanked with an extremely volatile internet token. It just doesn't make any sense at all, does it? But I see that kind of psychology in very rich people all the time. They really like to sort of justify their incredible amounts of wealth by saying that they're being charitable when actually nothing that they do is charitable. They're so far removed from what people actually need that it's just not. But they like to say that because it makes them look good and it makes them feel better as well, I think. So
Sure. And I also think that there's the tax benefits are so intense that in my mind, that's how rich people think about charity. Is they're like,
yeah,
how much money am I saving?
Yeah, like when they set up like foundations and then all of a sudden, like in their Wikipedia profile, it says philanthropist. It's like,
yep.
Yes.
No. Don't get me started because I start going off. I start going off when I think about Bill Gates donating to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I understand they do some good stuff, but you're just like, what?
But when it's like when the foundation has a board on it that's just basically all of your friends who all think the exact same way as you do, it's basically another company, isn't it? That's all it is.
None of these people are getting any less rich either. I should point out that like all the billionaires who were going to give away all their money before they ever died, they sure do seem to still be topping the billionaire lists right now. So,
well, and Cass, it's funny you mentioned that check your financial privilege thing because the foundation that book is supporting, the HRF, is of course another one of Peter Thiel's little projects because he's like the largest
is the Human
single
Rights
donor.
Foundation Peter Thiel he helped found it?
He's the largest single donor behind HRF is Peter Thiel.
Gross.
So just to connect that back to the beginning of the episode, and now you can start to see why I was so excited when I was watching Mooncat's video, because you caught that, and a lot of people missed some, like how deeply Peter Thiel has embedded himself. And like Blake Masters, his former COO of the Thiel whatever, is running for Senate. J.D. Vance is Thiel funded. And like these same guys are the ones getting all the crypto money and the support from the crypto PACs, because it's all united ideologically around this idea of creating, which I thought the analogy you came up with of like this digital decentralized seastead was really accurate. They want this place where they can transact, act, and create free of any regulatory supervision. And so they're doing that by weakening the places that still have regulatory supervision and trying to come up with systems that are increasingly hard to regulate.
Yeah, but yeah, when I read about Peter Thiel's plan to seastead, I was just like, I might have to do a whole video on seasteading because it's like half scary and half hilarious at the same time. Like they haven't got very far with it yet, and like the farthest that they've got is like this 5 meter square plinth in the middle of the sea somewhere.
Well, and there was also a group of Bitcoiners who purchased a cruise ship to start their own seastead, but
it's the same person. Wait, this is the same person who got arrested or almost got arrested and essentially executed in Thailand. But yeah, go on. Sorry,
they forgot to do things like get insurance, make sure the ship was registered, pay for fuel. And so they ended up like stranded off the coast of Mexico or something without any fuel and needed to get like rescued back to the mainland because their little seasteading adventure had ended disastrously. Then there was like a whole big legal case because the group that bought the boat had no money to deal with it, and wherever it was didn't want the boat a few miles off their coast anymore.
Yeah, it always ends up like that. It ends up a few miles off someone's coast, and then whoever's coast it is, they're just like, I don't want all these rich old white men here just avoiding taxes. This is not beneficial to me at all. A lot of people in my comments were talking about the game BioShock and saying how it's very similar to that. I've never played like BioShock before. I had no idea it existed, but
BioShock is fun. BioShock is a good game.
Yeah, apparently it doesn't end well in BioShock is what
no. It's funny that you bring up seasteading because it's like, I think seasteading was a more popular concept maybe 5 years ago, where people really believed this idea of like, okay, we'll just build our own island of man-made materials. It'll be great. And then they started trying it and they were like, oh, wow, not only is this way harder than I thought it was going to be, it sucks. This is not fun and nobody enjoys it. So I think that's died back. But in its place, we've now got like crypto islands and like places that Bennett and I have gone to, like in Reno, where you have millionaires with egos bigger than their millions of dollars that they have being like, you know what we're going to do? we're just going to turn this desert into a blockchain utopia. And you're like, one, how? Two, why blockchain? What does that have to do with changing everything here? And they're like, just trust me on this. I got this.
Yeah, if Cryptoland actually was successful, that's quite scary to think about. The website's still up and everything. Like, I know the sale of the island didn't go through, but it seems like the whole project hasn't been abandoned.
These things just go. They just linger on forever.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go back. One of the ones I've been talking about a lot lately, because I think Max Kaiser is a Russian propaganda tool and a bad human being. Max Kaiser famously helped start a coin called Max Coin. That still exists somehow, you know? You don't understand how. It's not like Max Kaiser has spoken about Max Coin in 5 years or whatever, but it still is out there. So people can still buy it if they want to, I guess. But then people will argue that that's the benefit of the blockchain. It's immutable. It'll always exist or whatever.
Immutability is like one of my challenges in discussing cryptocurrency with people who own cryptocurrency is that like censorship resistance and immutability are not without serious externalities, right? Like there may be times when it is worthwhile or even good to be able to send a transaction a government wants to stop, right? Or to be able to store a piece of data that people don't want to be stored. But the flip side of this is that it enables all the times you would want to stop that transaction or you desperately would want to remove that data. Those are off the table, right? And so you end up with several companies have tried to do social media on the blockchain, right? Twitch, BitClout, whatever Dan Larimer's bullshit was. And all of them ended up with this problem where people started posting awful things, right? The child exploitation.
Probably anonymously as well, right?
Yeah, or at least pseudonymously. And that's a bad thing. You don't want a social media account or a social media platform full of revenge porn and child exploitation. And the only solution they've come up with to solve that is to write like custom front ends that don't show you part of the blockchain.
I just want to say that I think I would suspect that cryptocurrency bros would argue that all of that stuff exists in our world as is. So like Facebook, there's a ton of child exploitation stuff on Facebook and on Google Images that is hidden by putting in the right search terms or whatever. And I mean, there's truth to that. I think they also would argue that like all the financial negative stuff that our, like, let's say our government or these rich people do, you could see it on the blockchain. Wouldn't that be so much better? Isn't this the transparent version of what we're criticizing? So I'd be interested to hear actually both of your thoughts on that.
I think there's a reason that append-only databases have never been used in like businesses before. Is that there is a reason things are deleted sometimes, and you don't always see that as some sort of conspiracy of somebody trying to hide something from you. I mean, it ties in really well with the whole like QAnon Pizzagate thing. Like people are convinced that there's some sort of secret cabal who are trying to hide everything from you. But I don't think the world works that well. Like I don't think people are able to
keep secrets.
Yeah, keep secrets that well. And even if they did, they wouldn't hide like coded clues about it in the public for everybody to see. So
from like a very practical viewpoint, I delete things sometimes. Tweets I put out, and then as soon as it actually posts, I read it and go, you know what? I would rather no one else read what I just wrote. And so I delete it, right? Or back in college, I wrote a book on intermittent fasting, and then a year or two later, as I was reading more studies, I was seeing increasing evidence that intermittent fasting as a diet was leading to an increased incidence of eating disorders, right? And so at that point, I removed my book from the marketplace and took down a lot of my posts and stuff like that. And I was able to do that because I was able to go in and delete the posts and remove it from sale and do those things because it wasn't immutable, right? I thought it was potentially causing harm, and so I was able to stop it.
Mooncat, do you see any value whatsoever in any of this stuff? Or do you think it's all just bottom up, top down, total trash?
I did try really hard to find some positives. I tried, but like, no. If this was ever useful for anyone, then it would only be useful if we regulated it. And if we regulated it in any way, then all of a sudden it's just not decentralized at all, is it? It's not decentralized anyway, but it would be even less decentralized if we even regulated it, because there's got to be someone who looks over these regulations and decides on them. And if it was regulated, it would be better. But I don't think we'd end up with a better system than what we have now. And the system we have now is imperfect and obviously benefits the rich, but it's a better system than the blockchain. And I think we just need to try and push forward with the policies that we've built over the past few centuries and not roll them back is my general thoughts on it.
Are you at all concerned with, like, people in cryptocurrency are constantly concerned about government overreach? They're constantly concerned about your privacy and your rights. They're constantly concerned about a lot of issues that aren't necessarily our primary issues. But I wonder if you see truth to that and what you would hope. If you do see any truth to that, I mean, if you say no, then cool. But if you do see any truth to that, what you would hope to see as a solution? To
the government having like sort of too much power over people?
Sure, yeah.
I do see that side of the argument. Like, you've got to fight against, totalitarianism in all of its forms. But I think that in government there's good actors and there's bad actors. But like when you sort of compare that with the free market, you're literally saying, well, people who are only motivated by money know better what's for society than what government does. And I think, in government there's good and bad people, and I think a better system is to vote for who you think is the good people, because in that system, at least no matter how much money you have, you all have equal amount of say. And in this world that they're proposing, it's absolutely the opposite of that.
Feels quite feudal, the alternative that you're talking about that they present, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite scary to think about where it could get. Even though this system we have is pretty terrible, that one is much worse.
I know people sometimes look at me askance when I start to say crypto wants to bring about a techno neofeudalism, and they say, no, it doesn't. It wants to unseat the man or whatever. But when you actually listen to people who own cryptocurrency discuss cryptocurrencies, they'll often basically admit that that's what they want, right? They'll talk about building their citadels to keep people out, or say certain people aren't going to make it, which of course leaves the question as to make it where. And if you ask them, they'll say to the citadel, to financial freedom, to being a member of this future class. Like, there is a tacit acknowledgement, especially among Bitcoiners, but among crypto as a whole, that a probable end state is feudalism, is a bunch of people working for the moneyed few.
That's definitely where it would end up if there were no regulations put on it at all. That's for sure where it would end up. I don't know if that will happen, how likely that is to happen, but all I'm trying to say is I don't want it to happen. There's a lot of people under my video like, look back on this video in 5 years, you'll see how wrong you were. And it's like, well, you're happy about that? Like,
that's that. I definitely feel that. And that, again, we're coming full circle here in that it's like these same people who are absolutely telling everybody, like, look, we're trying to help the poorest of the poor people. We're trying to bank the unbanked, and we're trying to just benefit society as a whole. And then you say, hey, zoom out like you always tell us to do, and look at what the future holds for you and your Bitcoin as a world reserve currency. And they just don't want to do that. They don't want to see that they are bringing 1,000 years of we're rolling the clock back 1,000 years on finance, basically.
It is also very hypocritical to, if you're investing all of your money into Bitcoin or whatever crypto, you're basically betting against your own country's currency, aren't you? And I don't think these people call themselves patriots, and I don't think that they realize it's so hypocritical to bet against your own country and then say that you love America. It's like the fiat money system is basically, they're saying it's not backed up by anything and they're saying it's fake. It's like, do you realize that that's the exact thing that's holding your country together and making it stable? You're saying it has no value and that everybody should sell it. And like, do they not realize like what that comes to? Like you use it for sanctions to keep your country secure, but they don't seem to realize like the sort of cognitive dissonance of all of that.
I had a 21-year-old American tell me that fiat is going to die and that I don't know what I'm talking about and that get ready for it, essentially. And I was like, man, I'm so tired of seeing this. I've been seeing it for decades now. I'm old enough that I can say I've been seeing this for at least 15, 20 years now. Guess what? The US dollar is still around. The British pound is still around. The euro is still around.
It's always been a money-making scheme to like make people scared of whatever big thing is happening, though, isn't it? Like it's make people scared of a thing and so tell them that you've got the solution. It's always been the way.
That reminded me of one last thing I want to touch on, which was you brought up the business plot from back when FDR was president in the United States, and some of the ideological similarities between the group behind that and what's common in cryptocurrency. Could you speak to that briefly?
Basically, we got rid of the gold standard and the rich elite were not happy with that. And basically, they love the gold standard so much because it takes monetary power away from the government, basically, because it's backed up by a physical thing. And there's also a lot of arguments that like gold doesn't even really have value in itself anyway. It's just like gold has value based on what we think of it, in the same way as fiat does.
Shiny.
Yeah, like we don't really use it much apart from like, you know, conductors or jewelry. But anyway, they love it so much because it's like this rigid thing that they can like base all of the free market on. Yeah, and then you know when Nazism had a rise in the 1930s as well, like you know they found that they had the same ideologies because you know this whole idea about Jewish people like being in control of the banks and the media and the whole thing about sort of inflation you're being told inflation is good is actually propaganda because it's just them controlling and getting rid of your money because they want to keep it for themselves. And it's these same ideologies that are now being repeated by Bitcoin enthusiasts mostly, which is, I don't think a lot of them realize that. And then obviously when like Jordan Peterson was announced to speak at a Bitcoin event, they were all really shocked. When in reality, like obviously he's got like deep ties with Peter Thiel. Like they're like really trying to control the thinking of people to think that the way they do, and it's really quite scary when you dig into how deeply this is connected between these people.
What you're talking about doing is what I think most people in cryptocurrency would say: do your own research. And what you're actually doing is the most important research, which is following the money. And I think almost none of these cryptocurrency bros bother doing that, which is so funny because that's what the blockchain is supposed to be all about, is financial transparency. But most wouldn't know that there's a Peter Thiel, Jordan Peterson connection, or for instance, what Bennett said, like I didn't even know Peter Thiel and the Human Rights Foundation connection. Like these things exist. They're actually right in front of our faces. It's like how Banksy would put on like a bright vest, bright jumper or whatever and go paint, and then nobody would ask a question because it looks like he's supposed to be there. It's like if Peter Thiel just implants himself in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, then it's like nobody ever asked, why the fuck is Peter Thiel hanging out here and being a kind of weird neo-Nazi? So I think you're doing a really great thing, not just by entertaining people and talking about it, but hopefully some people are learning how to do your own research, which is like what they always tell us to do. So I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a problem telling people to do their own research because like we're all looking for stories, aren't we? We're all just looking for things that back up our existing worldviews, and I think we can only sort of get to whatever the truth is, whether the truth even exists, by sort of talking about things, having a discourse, and watching my videos, but also watch people that disagree with me. Like it's all about sort of throwing information around, isn't it? And we come to a conclusion eventually. I always think of that experiment where, I don't know if you heard about this, but they get like hundreds of people to guess the amount of M&Ms in a jar. And out of all of the people who guess how many M&Ms are in the jar, if you take the average, then it's like the correct amount. So that's what keeps me going, like thinking that we're going to get to the right answer eventually.
I mean, I think that's actually, I think people think about no-coiners or critics and skeptics like myself and you and Bennett as people who are incredibly pessimistic and kind of like vibe off hating the world, cynical, you know? And I just don't think that's true. I am very pessimistic about new businesses. I'm very pessimistic about people who tell me like, I'm going to fix the financial system, bro. That I'm very pessimistic about. But when it comes to like the future of humanity, I actually think I'm far more optimistic than most of these cryptocurrency people.
Yeah, technology is being innovated at an increasingly fast rate. And I think that so many good things could come out of that as long as we keep it in check. You know, things like 3D printing and all of these, biotech firms are doing really interesting stuff, but some of them are doing really scary stuff.
Oh, sure.
Like, I don't know if you've heard about like Peter Thiel and all of these Silicon Valley people are trying to like live forever. It's crazy.
Drinking some blood.
Yeah.
Literally,
Drinking
he's
the blood
literally
of
a
young
vampire.
boys.
It's like...
Yeah, they're all getting. Isn't Brian Armstrong doing that too? The CEO of Coinbase. I think it's like a lot
really?
of it's a lot of these guys. But yeah, all of the billionaires want to do that, and I think it says a couple things. But one is, you know how people say like money can't buy you happiness. I almost wonder like, maybe it can, because these people sure do seem to want to live a lot longer than I do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are cryogenically frozen as well, aren't they? Because they think that they'll be able to be unfrozen in the future. I mean, there must be some good research into that if they're paying so much for it. I don't know, but like, yeah,
I think it's the only option that there even is. So they're just like, fuck it, throw the dart at the board. Let's hope it sticks. People loved, and this is another great point. I'm going to try to end this soon, but your video helped me remember how much like we love to idolize very, very wealthy people. And it's a very American thing. I don't know if that's all over the world, but it is definitely in America. Like, just everyone wants to get as rich as the richest rich people. And once you see how rich the rich people have gotten, you assign them all this. It's like Gary Vee or other people, but you assign, they must be smart. They must know more about the world than I do. They must have more wisdom than I do. And the reality is that, like, no, of course they don't. They're just people. No. They're just like you. And so when we go like, oh, there must be something to life extension, it's like, no, there absolutely isn't. And they're just nutcases.
They just need something else to throw their money into, don't they? So it's just another thing to throw. Like,
it's either space or life extension, basically.
Just throw another $1 million at that, and it might work. It's the same thing as like throwing $1 million into a startup. That's, you know. Yeah, I think that they want to, in a way that because they're in the tech world, they kind of want to come back in 20, 30, 40 or however many years and see where it got to. I think that's what they actually like want, and they want to see if their ideas actually made it into the future. And I just think it would be quite funny if like Peter Thiel got frozen, then he came back in like 50 years and there was some sort of like communist socialist utopia going on, and it like turned out that actually worked really well. You'd be like, shit.
I would like it better if his AI that he created woke him up and it was like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and he just like instantly, the robot just says like, you made me, and just rips him apart or something. You know, that would just be much more apt as far as I'm concerned.
That is a film. That is a film in the making. That. Yeah.
Cass, did you know Raphael Nicolay, the Ponzi scheming founder of Bitfinex, is now super into life extension?
Makes sense. Yeah. Ponzi schemers, of course, would be like, because then the Ponzi can actually go on forever. Then the Ponzi won't ever end. Mooncat, this was fantastic. I'm so glad you could join us. Is there anything you would want our listeners to kind of, if and when they watch your video, what should the main takeaway be?
Oh, I don't know. Just watch it and you'll come with your own takeaway, I suppose. But yeah, just be very mindful about the people behind crypto. And it's not this grassroots movement that many people think it is. It's all these very sort of scary people that want to rule the world with algorithms. So yeah, I
think Bennett and I we fell into this rabbit hole mostly because of the characters that were involved. I think that more so than like, wow, Bitcoin or Tether or Ethereum, it was like, man, these executives are fucking weird, man. So I think that's actually a good point and compelling for people. It's a great point. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. It's been lovely.
Well, I hate to close out a really wonderful episode like that in a sad fashion, but I'm getting word from upstairs. President of Crypto Critics Corner, Bennett Tomlin, has let me know that if you guys don't rate and review the podcast, Crypto Critics Corner is going to get canceled. He's going to cancel the show. And there's nothing I can really do to control him. The man has rage and temper in his heart, and I wish I could stop him, but I can't. So if you could rate and review the podcast, you can save the show. Good luck. Godspeed, everybody.